Okay, hello, and welcome to the next episode of the Untrodden podcast. This time I'm joined by Nance, who has a Substack and a YouTube channel, I believe mainly with the name 3 Billion Nances. If you want to check out more stuff that you're working on, you've got nonfiction, theory, um, you've got some fictional stories where, and I think it's important for you to connect these things and explore the same ideas through both of these forms, from what I understand. But yeah, you've got both of those things, so check that out, everyone who doesn't know. And yeah, so we're just here, we're just talking. One of the things I mentioned I wanted to talk to you about that I've talked a tiny bit about on my stream, but I don't know much about, I haven't really dug into, is AI and Nickland. So I'd love to hear about. I'll just give you my like basic take on AI, and you can tell me what you disagree with or what you think about, um, and we can see how it compares. But my basic take on AI so far, my kind of philosophical take, past like any like utility or basic use right now, is basically that I think human consciousness is kind of like reducible to certain factors, and I don't think we can like fully grapple all of them. I don't think we can like have all of it. But essentially, it is something like a mathematically reducible thing, and eventually AI will get to the point where it can replicate all those, and it will be indistinguishable. And we'll have to have like a reckoning where it just kind of becomes assimilated into the you know whole sphere of consciousness. Now I can't say when that will happen, when we'll reach that point. I just think it's a possibility. I'm just making the claim that it's a possibility philosophically for us to for the us to converge and have a meeting point there. And that's basically my take on AI. But obviously you can go a whole lot of other directions with AI. So let me know. Let me know when you think about that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably a very common, probably pretty popular view on intelligence as such, and people try to um, hold up intelligence and like have it as this like concrete positivistic thing. And I think a lot of like positivists and a lot of formalists, which I think largely took over the sciences and philosophy in the 20th century probably feel that way, but I think I do come down hard on this that there's something irreducible in human subjectivity, and even if that something is purely like constructed, if it's purely fiction, um, we are, as far as we can tell, the only beings that do that, and it's a negative thing, and that's precisely at odds with kind of the way artificial intelligence operates. I think for me, that's largely informed by Bataille and Lacan, even Hegel. But I think probably most people would agree with your view or what you stated, that intelligence is ultimately functional and the machine will catch up to it at some point. I think machines will catch up to us at some point, but I think that's because a negativity will develop somewhere and actual subjectivity will arise in the electronic substrates or whatever. Like I don't think subjectivity or what Mikey and I call human intelligence. I don't think that's necessarily in the meat brain. Like I think that could probably happen in silicon or whatever substrate. But I think as far as it goes for now, there's something irreducible in human intelligence that can't be um, replicated machinically, positivistically. And I think that's the problem. I think that's what capitalism does. It positivizes everything. That's what artificial intelligence is. It's this kind of machine for collating and identifying and assigning functions and roles and stuff like that. So I think it's important that we stand up for negativity. But I also think it's important that we don't do the mystical thing either. A lot of people take that and want to go into like mysticism and new age. Oh, I'm spiritual, not religious.
Right.
Recently, I've been coming out pretty hot against that. Um, and there's more to come. But that's the thing. I think most people are convinced that intelligence is a functional thing, and machines will catch up to it.
Yeah, I don't know if we actually disagree then, because I don't think I would define I mean, I might define it as a functional thing, but I wouldn't disagree with you that the negativity, like that kind of dynamic, that social, um, whatever that is, if we use like a Hegel framework to define that, whatever that is, I don't really have a problem with admitting that that exists and that that would be required. So I think you even acknowledge like it could happen. It's just not going to happen through this like strictly, I don't know, instrumentalized form, which I don't necessarily
Y-
disagree with.
Yeah, I mean, and it goes back with specifically with artificial intelligence. A lot of the cyberneticists and system theories guys were like like on the side of the symbolic, and they were on the side of syntax, and they did away with semantics.
Hmm.
And that's there aren't a whole lot of philosophers thinking about cybernetics and artificial intelligence. I think there needs to be more. And to be honest, I say there's not a lot. I think that's bullshit. I think there are a ton. I just think it's less popular because um, it's it's an open question. Whereas from this purely formal view, you can commoditize it and you can make Chat GPT and you can make all these useful products.
Right.
So
Yeah, I have a at least personal like heavy dislike towards all the AI products, but I mean that's not, I don't know if I can make a principled argument in favor of that. I just heavily dislike them. Um, and obviously there's kind of the sense that it will be just another tool, and so in that sense you can criticize it on the level of other tools, but you shouldn't make it unique. Like
dude, yeah, I just went on a rant about my toaster
yeah.
the other day, and yeah, the LLMs and the GPTs, they're fantastic tools, and they're great at what they do. But my toaster is also great at what it does. And there was a point in time when the toaster was a magical invention, and it even performs intellectual labor. Like it decides when the bread has had enough heat
Hmm.
applied to it, and it does the thing. Like um, I think it's absurd that we know how the models work. People talk about gradient descent and people talk about recursive learning and the perceptron and adversarial networks, and they mystify it. They say it's a black box. And while in a sense, there's billions of operations happening, there's billions of parameters. So we don't know all of the operations that are happening because we just can't know billions, hundreds of billions. But we know how it operates. So to do the mysterious thing with LLMs is absurd. Now, LLMs aren't the only form of
Hmm.
artificial intelligence,
Right.
but they're the most common, and they're the ones that are being kind of shoved down our throats, and they're the ones that are causing teenage boys to take their own lives, flocks of lonely Gen Xers and even millennials to join absurd religions. They're causing havoc. So I think we should deal with them first and foremost.
Right. I wonder if you would disagree with this. I've always thought, in terms of people killing themselves or becoming crazy, I've always thought like that they're not like becoming that from the AI. It's just sort of a thing that they're using. It's picking up on things that are already the case for them, right? So like an AI isn't going to make you, I don't know, schizophrenic and believe you discovered a new religion. It's not gonna. It can't single handedly make you do that. But if you're the kind of person who would do that, it can help you do that, right, in a more effective
Yeah,
way. And
yeah. It's an accelerant, and it's very good at what it does because again, it's very convincing. The toaster is less convincing.
hmm,
The toaster won't necessarily drive one to psychosis, although I'm sure we could find stories in the annals of history of someone being
yeah,
driven mad by a toaster.
it's possible.
Um, but yeah, it's a very effective accelerant because people do think on that formalistic positivistic side of like this is what intelligence does, therefore it must be intelligent. This is what human consciousness is, therefore we must have recreated human consciousness. Whereas it's like, no, we just made a really convincing tool. But yeah, it definitely accelerates, I think, seeds that are latent, probably in most of us, if not all of us. And it's not being able to have the critical distance. And I don't blame people. People are working, people are tired, people are scared, and they turn to these things for ease or convenience or even for solace in the long dark night. I don't blame anyone. That's why I think we need more people talking about it like in a rigorous philosophical way. Um, but yeah, I don't think they make you crazy. I think they nurture what's
Hmm.
there.
Right. So what do you think? Where does Nick Land play into this for you? Because I'll be honest, I'm not like super educated on what he's bringing to the table. My familiarity is basically that he thinks that there's something inherently self-destructive in our ability to like create new tools, and somehow we're going to create a tool that will destroy us and organize us and kind of destroy our own being in some way. That's my very loose idea of what he believes. Where do you think he comes into this? Where do you see a lot of value in what he has to say?
So I think Nick, in his earlier work, was very concerned with like what does it mean to be a human, and he was very much a materialist or a physicalist, and he was very concerned with maybe even like a Schopenhauerian view, even though he would laugh at Schopenhauer, but like this the search for meaning,
Hmm.
and I think he kind of came down and said the human is that which resists entropy, and ultimately that's kind of a futile cause. And I think you could even say maybe there was a little optimism in there, and said therefore it's up to us to take up the charge to make meaning for ourselves. I I don't think he would publicly say that aloud, and most people who like Land probably would disagree with that. But I mean I love Land,
Mm-hmm.
because I share a similar, maybe pessimistic, nihilistic view. But then he kind of went on in the wake of, definitely in the wake of Heidegger, definitely in the wake of the cyberneticists, definitely in the wake of Deleuze and Guattari, like really trying to figure out um, where we are, how can we be effective, either politically or personally or interpersonally. And he kind of saw that capital operates as an artificial intelligence, like
Hmm.
capital, uh, the MCM prime is is a cybernetic feedback loop. And so he really, really was the guy that championed that, um, and allows us, I think, to see how far capital goes back in time. Like, um, and I mean, they're like David Graeber. Like, I don't know. There's all kinds of different ways to view history, but Land's kind of view on capitalism as the consequence of this cybernetic feedback loop, which resembles an artificial intelligence. And so essentially now I think he would say intelligence is that which resists entropy, and intelligence is that which can kind of find the line of flight. Um, and he's kind of eschewed the human, but in a weird way, um, he really hasn't at all. Like he really is, I think, deeply humanistic. It's just maybe he doesn't express that.
Hmm.
And I think a lot of Land fans go for the edgy stuff, which I think probably initially was was desirable for me. Like, just like, oh yeah, everything sucks and we're all gonna die. But the whole Dark Enlightenment, the NRX, all that stuff. To be honest, I still don't know where to integrate that into the Nick Land that I know from one reading him and also talking to him. Like, um, it's kind of like the NRX, the Dark Enlightenment, all the Twitter shit. Like, yeah, that's a performance. Um, and why is he performing that? I don't know. But he had this unique insight into capital as this cybernetic feedback loop, and what does that mean for us? Like, are we caught up in that feedback loop? Can we get out? Do we have a line of flight or whatever? As far as his views on artificial intelligence, um, I think he is mm, definitely on that positivistic side, definitely on the side of saying like, yeah, the machines will do this better than we can.
Hmm.
Um, and I just have to disagree on that point. It's like, yeah, I think we're doing something different. Like what we do resembles this kind of machinic intelligence. But just because it resembles it does, like, no, there's more to it. Like I do believe in meaning, even though I am a nihilist and
Right.
all the edgy dark shit. Like I still believe in meaning because it's right before my very eyes. Like I have kids, I have loved ones, I have best friends, and I have people who can't stand me and I can't stand them. Like all that's real. It's not just an illusion.
Mm-hmm.
Although maybe it is an illusion, but still it's mine. So fuck you. Don't take it from me.
Right. Yeah, I read your article about kind of subjectivity and if there was like a mind ship where you could like everyone was in kind of a hive mind and you could always understand people's
Yeah.
thoughts. It would kind of destroy the purpose of subjectivity itself, I think is your argument. Because subjectivity relies on, the negativity, the kind of lack of knowing, kind of the disconnect. Otherwise, I mean, obviously, like there is no subjectivity per se. What I wanted to ask you about that article, I can understand why you have that preference. Do you think that's like a would you argue for it as a like objectively valid premise, or is it like it is what it is? This is how I feel. I'm just gonna die on this hill. Like, do you like? Would you? How would you articulate that argument?
I don't know, man, because then you're asking like, am I making am I making prescriptions? Like, is that what you're asking? Like, am I being
Kind of, yeah.
normative?
A little bit, yeah. Like, are you saying, yeah, I'm purely, this is just my opinion. I know that it could be contradicted by anyone, but it is what it is. This is just where I'm saying, or would you defend subjectivity as a better thing than the hive mind world?
That's probably deserves an easy answer, and I think the easy answer is yeah, of course I would defend it. But there's a deeper answer, and the deeper answer is like I don't know. I'm afraid of that, like because I don't want to be making prescriptions and proclamations at all. I think, in a sense, like defending subjectivity is ultimately defending that position of like, no, this is the way it is because I say it is the way it is. I don't care about
Hmm.
the world as such. I don't care about history as such. Like ultimately, it's almost like a radical solipsism,
Hmm.
and it's saying like, I have no choice but to be in this like solipsistic thing. Like I think that's what subjectivity is, and the human is when you take the step beyond that positivized solipsistic universe and you go out into like the outside and capitalism doesn't let us do that. Like capitalism keeps us kind of trapped in this solipsistic bubble where Mikey and I were just talking the other day about the commodity versus like the object of use versus the object of exchange. Um, and like I gave him a movie, and the movie box is old and used, and it's scratched up and dinged up, and it's like if it had any collector's value at all, it's gone out the window because I scratched it. The disc is probably scratched. Who knows? But to him, that object is more valuable because it touched another human and it interacted with them and it sat with them and lived with them. So it like that's a way to break down what the commodity does to us. Where if I buy like my computer mouse, like or my headphones, if I were to go buy a brand new pair of headphones and they were scratched up, I would be pissed and I would say this is an imperfect object. How dare
Right.
you? And so I think I don't know. All that to say, yes, I would defend subjectivity, but I also think everybody has to defend subjectivity, and it's not a thing that you can tell someone to do. I think it's a thing that someone has to come into contact with on their own, and therefore go on about it. So I think it's absurd to make prescriptions about it, although I am making a prescription
Hmm.
about it.
Right. What do you? There's this kind of perception that French theory, I think, is like kind of a regression into subjectivity in some senses. Like they're obsessed with subjectivity, and whereas like Hegel, for example, incorporated the object, the outside world, the interplay between the two, um, and that sort of thing. So I think there's some like especially traditional Marxists who would argue that postmodernism is regressive because it's subjective in that way. So how would you respond to that? Like why do you not agree with that charge? Like what is your what do you think all of that theory is getting at that isn't regressive, that's actually, true or doesn't fall to that criticism or whatever?
I think the point of Hegel is to take you to that point of subjectivity, if you will, and leave you there, strand you in those dark woods. I think maybe a lot of Marxists are positivists themselves in this. Maybe not. I'm not going to say that. Who knows, right? But I think the French. post-structuralists and people that get called postmodernists are really trying to grapple with a world that has been itself turned on its head by way of like reproduction by like the global media, like at the newspapers and radio and television and all this stuff. Like we used to have like a real world, and then in the interwar period and the post-war period, like all that got turned inside out, and everything was made postmodern, and so the quote unquote postmodernists, I think, are grappling with that largely and trying to come out of the again, I think it's a solipsism that the commodity forces on us. And I sure maybe it is subjective, but I think that's the point of Hegel, that Hegel is bringing us to this moment of subjectivity. I think the postmodernism, postmodernists, postmodernity, it's such a funny word. It gets overused. I definitely overuse it. I've been talking to my buddy Sean, and I think we've agreed to use Jameson's version of postmodernity, which is the post-war period.
Right.
Which for me, I don't love. Like I tie it back to like the end of the second industrial revolution. But also, who gives a shit? Let's find a better word for it. The word doesn't matter. I think it's a condition, and I think people who disagree with the French theorists on the terms of saying, oh, they're just too postmodern, they're just subjectivist, they're relativist. Hegel is the way to go. I would just say, well, I see all that postmodern shit in Hegel as well. Like I think that's where it's coming from. So maybe I'm reading Hegel wrong. I probably am. I definitely am. But also I think maybe they are too.
Maybe, yeah. I mean, when I read Hegel, there's the sense that it's subjective, but it's also making a claim that, about reality, about the world around us, that there is not really a world
Sure.
around us, that it's kind of conditioned by us and we are conditioned by it. And because there's
Yeah,
that
yeah.
interplay of both, you can't really reduce it to just subjectivity. Um, Otherwise, it would
Well,
be more Kantian or Fichte or something like that, which I think is a little bit more subjective. But
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I really do think like Foucault and Baudrillard and Virilio, like I don't think they are reducing it to
mm,
subjectivity. Like I really do think they are trying to grapple with the world as
right,
such.
that's fair too. Yeah.
Um, yeah.
What do you think about? I guess it comes up naturally here. So you keep bringing up capitalism. So do
Yeah.
you? What is your what is your feelings about Marx? I guess we can start there. Like, what is your opinion on the Marxist critique? Is that something you're super sympathetic to, or do you have a lot of problems with it? Or what is the most important part of it to you? Yeah, what do you think about Marx? Because we talk about Marx on this channel a lot. So
Yeah, I mean I do love Marx. And I think Marx is probably, for me, my initial departure point into whatever it is I am now was Proudhon as a
hmm,
disgruntled teenager. Um, and I discovered Marx by way of Proudhon, and Bakunin, and I think, and Rousseau, and I think ultimately Marx was better on what conditions our daily lives in the modern world than all these other guys. So MC and Prime, that
hmm,
feedback loop, the circuit of capital. Like I think that's it. And then from there you can kind of extrapolate. I think I did used to consider myself um, an avid Marxist. I think I thought I was a trot for a while.
hmm,
I definitely still flirt with Posadism.
hmm,
Unironically and ironically, like that's the thing with Posadism. You can never really tell if it's serious or not. Um, but I think political Marx for me is too teleological, and maybe
hmm,
most traditional Marxists for me are too teleological. And I'm not throwing hands at anybody. I'm not trying to disparage anybody. I just, for me, I'm no longer convinced of the kind of march of history. I'm no longer convinced of um, you know
hmm,
politics. But that doesn't mean we can throw Marx out. I do think Marx is probably the best starting point if you're really trying to get down to brass tacks about what are we doing, what can we do, what should we do, what does the future look like, is there a future? So yeah, I think probably. I mean, I still consider myself some kind of Marxist,
Hmm.
but that doesn't really matter because uh, I'm probably not in most people's eyes.
Right. Yeah, I would actually say, as someone who's more of like a liberal, who's open to other ideas, and that sort of thing, I would actually say like the political Marx is the most interesting to me. Not because I agree with it, but just because it feels like the most like biting critique of liberalism.
Mm,
Because
yeah.
it's really taking that critique of capital and saying, this is what is fundamentally true about the political system. Whereas I feel like a lot of leftist critiques of liberal politics today are very shallow. Like they're very much just kind of like the Democrats are bad because they're not
Yeah.
enough. And like it's like okay, so like what does that mean? Like why? Whereas Marx is
Yeah.
really saying it's not about the establishment being bad because they're like morally corrupt or something. It's really fundamentally the nature of the system, how liberalism contradicts itself. Like it's a necessity, and so I understand why you'd criticize that, necessity, the teleological aspect, because I'm very like skeptical of that too. I think you and I would agree on that. But at the same time, because I'm skeptical of it, it, or related to the fact I'm skeptical of it, it has this like really powerful force to it as a critique
Hmm.
of liberalism, and so I'm very interested in that, and that's like one of the main things I've been talking about is like Bonapartism or whatever, because that's as a critique of liberalism, I find that very interesting.
Yeah. It's like it sets up the chessboard and the kind of rules of chess. I think with liberalism, modernity, whatever, capitalism. Um, the thing I'm not convinced about is um, us ever kind of resolving any contradictions ultimately. So I still think the
Hmm.
contradictions are there and like all the self undermining is there. I'm just like the Marxism is too utopian, and I think
Hmm.
that's the problem. And I think for me that's why Posadism was the most compelling branch of it because like they were like, no, we're doomed. We're just fucking doomed. And I think if we continue to play by those rules, I think we are doomed. And I think we tried it. We tried communism. We tried liberalism. We tried capitalism. People even tried fascism. We tried all these
Hmm.
varieties, and they all failed. So I think that means we should figure something else out rather than just keep knocking our head up against that wall.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. I've always had the same critique of Marxism, that it's like too optimistic, like it's like too hopeful,
Yeah.
because it
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
is always about like we can just abolish everything that gets in the way of human subjectivity. We can have full human subjectivity, and it will happen necessarily in history at some
Well,
point.
the thing is that it like ultimately it's like there's this core uh current or tendency toward ultimately disalienation or
Hmm.
ultimately reconciliation. So it's not even about ultimately having unbridled human subjectivity. Like it would be about the human object in a sense. Like the human becomes an object in Marxism. History becomes this totalizing force, and that for me is where I get off the bus.
Hmm.
Um, and I don't think Marx thought that way. I think that's been um, maybe that's a consequence of how people have taken up Marxism as this kind of historical necessary struggle. Um, I, I don't think you can use Marx to liberate human subjectivity. I think Marx was critical of his time, and now we've lived a couple hundred years longer, and we have new insights, and we're up against new obstacles.
Hmm.
But let's keep it real. It's the same obstacle. It has a new coat of paint on it.
Right, and that would be like the value that you see in like the critique of capitalism, I guess, is that
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
underlying
yeah.
structure. Yeah.
The commodity. I mean, ultimately, it's
Hmm.
value. It's the commodity. It's exchange.
Right.
And Marx articulates that in a way that I think allows us to get some wiggle room and actually be alienated subjects. But along with being subjects, like we have to defend our alienation as well, because that's a negation. That's a negativity that we can't allow to be filled in by ultimately the commodity, by value.
Right. And yeah, so you mentioned that you're completely uninterested in like politics at this point. So I guess we might as I'm interested to hear like what your perspective is on that and like where that comes from because I totally understand. So I'm not here to heavily critique it or something, but I am interested in hearing about it.
I okay. I'm not totally or completely uninterested. I definitely still get a little kick out of um, being aware of what's going on.
Mm.
I definitely think the genocide in Gaza right now is a historical thing that everyone should be concerned with. I think probably Ukraine and Russia is another thing that's probably really important. Um, but when it comes to like Trump, Biden, Obama, Hillary, when it even I don't know, like I still get emails from the AFL CIO, like I still get emails from the DSA, and I don't check them anymore. I just delete them.
Mm.
Like I just I think it's broken. I think the overwhelming majority of people who are involved are far too credulous. I think we shouldn't take these systems at face value. I
Mm.
think we should understand that they're kind of images that are trying to condition us and they're trying to set up kind of rules and parameters and expectations. So it's the Debord thing and the Baudrillard thing. Like I think we should be far more skeptical of these images because I think the images are infecting us
Mm.
with this tendency to just do the same thing over and over again. Go out, throw a brick through a window, uh, be a shitty, horrible person, have your heart broken. I mean, I voted for Obama the first time because I was like, "Yay, we can do it," and it was like, "Oh, this is weird." Like I'm this anarchist guy, and I feel hopeful because we're voting for a black president. So that was all weird, and then I had my heart broken, and that was like, "Whoa, this sucks." And so I was like, "Yeah, more Marxism, more this, more that."
Right.
Um, but really, that's just more of this spectacle, blood sports. It's professional football. It's professional wrestling. Um, I think I think Benjamin Studebaker is probably the best guy to talk to about politics right now
Mm.
because he has this view and he does the Zizek, the courage of hopelessness thing, but he has this ability to take this pessimistic position that I think I take. But he says, but that means you just have to do it better.
Mm.
I'm unable to want to do it better because it's just too much for me. It's like black licorice. I don't want to eat it, so I'm not going to eat it. Whereas Benjamin is like, well, yeah, but we have to eat it because
Mm.
maybe we can get to the fucking ice cream. I don't know.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I totally understand. My problem with leftists has always been they would take the Obama example, and what they would say is like Obama's just evil and corrupt, and the Democrats, like I said earlier, like they
It's
take that as
structural, dude.
exactly that. Like I'm more sympathetic if you're gonna say that something's wrong with Obama, it's not really about Obama. That's he couldn't do anything different. I mean, that's just the reality of the
Sure.
situation. And so I'm like infinitely more sympathetic to a critique of Obama that is really critiquing, the basis of the system because that's really what we're dealing with. Even if I'm not necessarily going to agree, but I'm like I want to take it up. I don't really have like I'm not decided on that question. Like I think we have to figure it out. I don't know the answer.
I would say he's still a dick though because he played up his Marxist like he played into like I was a radical in college and I was a Marxist like he uh but again like that is what people do like
Yeah,
that
that is
is like he didn't really have any other choice so not to say oh but he's still a bad guy but also no he is still a bad guy because I think all those people in politics are not genuinely interested in trying to make the world a better place? Like, I really don't. I think the people who are genuinely interested are on the fringes and are on the outside, and maybe more and more of them are in reading groups and having podcasts and taking courses outside academic structures and actually trying to be more effective now.
Mm.
So while it's a structural problem, and I don't think you should get invested in personalities in that way, I'm also totally okay to say, yeah, they all suck. They're all vampires.
Maybe, yeah. I wonder if that's too much optimism on your part, though, because you're kind of taking away the responsibility that we all have in that, and you're kind of saying, well, they are just bad people, I guess, at the top, and the good people are outside. Whereas I would say
That's totally fair.
there
Yeah,
aren't any good people that really. I mean, I think my personal feeling is that most of the ruling class genuinely does want to make the world a better place. The problem is really that they, for whatever like really deep seated reason about their lack of full consciousness, we could say, or the system, the structure, all these issues are really getting in the way of that, and that's a problem that we all have to face, right? So I feel like
for
we
sure.
have to see ourselves in their shoes in that to that degree. But I also
Yeah,
understand because they are running things that we tend to like lose the sympathy. We tend to get rid of the sympathy and say no, it's your fault because you're the person who could really steer the ship in a different direction. But no one on the ship really knows where to steer it, right? So,
yeah, for sure. I also think, yeah, I think I think probably Elon Musk is probably in some weird way is convinced that he's
hmm,
doing the right thing. I think most of these people are useful idiots for, and I would say they're useful for capital to
hmm,
personify capital, which I do all the time because I do think the commodity value exchange capital like the language is difficult to tie down, but I think it's that material force, that totalizing value structure is ultimately we're all behind that eight ball. Even guys like Peter Thiel, like they have like a preordained set of decisions that they're allowed to make. And so they
hmm,
have limited free will. And so, they find themselves making decisions that I think are horrendous, but I can also see how they would justify them in their mind. But ultimately, yeah, we have to accept the fact that we're all in this limited playing field. And the point is we need to break off this playing field.
right. So, what are when you think about breaking the playing field? I mean, do you claim to have any answers, or are you just
No.
like, yeah, like what are we doing here? Because I completely understand your kind of critique of like the DSA and a lot of the attempts to do something different. I think I for the most part agree with all your critiques, but there's also a question where it's like if you're just critiquing everything that exists, then what are you doing? Like that's
Yeah.
something you have to keep in mind. Which yeah, I'm not saying I'm better than that. I have that problem even more so. But I'm just pointing that out. Yeah. If how do you deal with that? What do you think about that problem? If you think about it a lot.
I dive into my belly button, dude. I mean, I'm constantly struggling with why why the fuck am I doing this? What the fuck am I doing?
Hmm.
Who the fuck do I think I am? What's the point? Um, I think um, moving away from identifying with some kind of like global consumer identity, which is ultimately like that's what being a Marxist is, or that's what being a leftist is, or that's what being any brand of anything is. It's a consumer identity.
Hmm.
I think moving away from that and trying to develop your own personal and interpersonal identity um, is probably the best thing any of us can do. Um, and for me, I like to be critical of everything. I like to have my cake and eat it too, and sit back and do the
Mm-hmm.
la di da di. I'm a fancy dilettante. But I also do think the only way we're going to remain human into the the coming future is if we figure it out. So not to say I think I can be a part of that because I doubt I can, but I do think encouraging other people to figure shit out for themselves is probably the best thing I can do because I think that's what it's going to take. Like I think it's
Hmm.
just going to take a radical reimagining of what it means to be human, which I would prescribe that is disconnecting from the global hive mind or the global hive consciousness or whatever. Um, but yeah, so I mean, I'm more often than not, I'm in this position of like I'm part of the problem. I'm not doing anything. Like I am just kind of simulating and doing this pseudo activity stuff. Um, but but I do think there's a point, and I think the point is encouraging others to to be more human. Like think about what it means to be a human. Think about what it means to be a subject. Stand on this negativity. Do that.
Mm.
Um, so I don't know. I'm definitely hypocritical. I'm definitely high on my own farts. But I don't. Maybe that's okay.
Yeah, I've been thinking about how I would respond to that critique myself, and I've just been thinking about kind of how like no one really has any answers, right? So people can pretend to
Yeah.
have answers, but I feel like if they're really honest with themselves, they might not say it publicly, but they also are kind of in the same like hopeless, confused position. And so maybe there is like a kind of virtue, or at least like a something in saying, listen, no one has any answers. I'm just trying to be honest about the fact that no one has any answers, and maybe in that process there will be some kind of process that can be worked through, that will help people more in the long run by being honest about that.
Yeah.
Like that's what I tell myself. I mean, I just recently made a video about like Hegel and skepticism and all that, and that was essentially my point. Is people can accuse me of being kind of a, I don't know, a liberal skeptic quietist where I just accept the status quo. And what I'm saying is, sure, but at the same time, I'm critiquing everything, dealing with everything, and I don't think any of you really believe in what you're saying as much as you say you do. And
Yeah.
maybe there's a utility in working through things in this way, which is what I'm trying to offer. But yeah, I do think we still have to take up the critique because like you said, I mean, we are hypocrites in some sense, and like that's like we have to struggle with that, I guess. But
Yeah.
yeah, um, what do you think about? I guess I'll ask you actually. What do you think about skepticism? Because you're into philosophy. So what do you think about? Because I feel like I typically end up going in a skeptic direction, like a fundamentally skeptical philosophical position, of just kind of undermining everything, and that would be my main critique of like the French theorists would be like a skeptical position. So what do you think about that? Like on a like, what do you? Yeah, I'm curious what you have to say about that.
I think in a sense, I think we should all start out from a skeptical position. Descartes, my homeboy.
Mm.
I think it can very easily be overdone. I think often it's very easy to become a contrarian as opposed to just like a healthy skeptical position. But yeah, I think critical thought starts from a skeptical position. Critical thought starts from this position of like, wait, hold on, are you sure?
Mm.
So I think it's a tightrope walk that um, needs to be actively managed. But I think, yeah, credulity and certainty is one of the, well, it's one of the features of, again, the commodity, right? Like the commodity presents itself as this thing, and it's like, you are certain. I am certain about my identity. You are certain about my identity. It's fully positivistic. There's no room for life itself. Um, so just in that regard, like being a subject, like I think we should be honest about our fallibility. We should be honest about our tendency to get carried away um, with narratives.
Mm.
So yeah, I think skepticism is a prerequisite for critical thought and like living life as opposed to just like going through the motions.
Right. Yeah. I mean,
But
that's
it's
kind of
also like here on the internet, man. It's it's too easy to fall into just being contrarian and being and I mean yeah I would definitely say there's a lot of like French theory enjoyers who just want to deconstruct. Well, it's like, well, at some point we have to construct something. Like we have to
mm.
have something. So
Yeah, I mean that's kind of like the argument that like Hegel makes is like it's like a tool. Skepticism is a tool, but you can't like rest there. I mean, a lot of people have made that argument. It makes sense. I guess I have problem actually implementing that. Like I agree with the idea that you have to construct something at some point. I agree with that in concept, but I don't actually know how to do that. Because if everything falls
you're doing it
prey to,
right now, dude.
well,
We're using language.
yeah, maybe, yeah,
We're sharing meaning.
yeah, I guess that's the best I've got. That's my attempt is to start a podcast and talk to people. I guess That's my constructed meaning. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, I mean it's
Like
something.
that, like legit. I think earnest engagement, which from what I've seen of you, you earnestly engage. I think that's a hell of a lot more than a lot of other people even can do, because
Mm,
they're like in this mode of like, we enjoy being smarter than everyone around us. We enjoy not getting duped and not getting hoodwinked, and we enjoy being the knower of all things.
right.
So I think just being able to come out and share meaning earnestly is a step in the right direction. So
Yeah,
good
I think so
job.
too. I hope so. Thank you. Good job. Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm curious what you think. I want to know more about like the commodity for you because I'm not. I can kind of understand it in concept, but I'm not. Yeah, I would like to. Yeah, I want to know more about what you think about the commodity and how that affects our lives and psychologically, I guess, or in terms of our consciousness. Yeah, I would like to hear more about that.
I think the commodity, it's just like this pure reified object, this purely positivistic, self-propelled mechanism. And I don't necessarily know if I would say it's an artifact of capital. It's definitely it's definitely taken up by capitalism.
Hmm.
But the commodity, as opposed to the object, and little o object, not big O object. So the commodity is opposed to the thing. So you have an object of use. You have this little, hold on, this little phallus keychain that one of my kids bought me when they went on a trip to Greece. It's a little phallus.
Greece. Okay.
This is a commodity, right? Because like someone made it, it's cheap, it's shitty, and they produced it to be bought by tourists.
Hmm.
Um, but it's like, I could look at it as just like a commodity and like leave it
Hmm.
on my desk and, oh, it's just another random thing. But because it was given to me by a child, and it has like meaning to it, like it's no longer a commodity, it's an object. It sits here on my desk and it has prize position, and it collects history, and it collects, not just markings from when it was on my keys and it banged around in my pocket and it got scratched. Um, it collects, I don't know, like human essence. Walter Benjamin talks about the aura of originality when in uh, Art in the Age of Mechanical Reproduction, the mechanical reproduction essay. Um, and the aura of originality is like, it's not some mystical thing. It's actually like, it's the defetishization of the object. So the
Hmm.
commodity fetish hides all the labor and all the environmental destruction and all the human hours and all the everything that goes into every single thing that you purchase.
Hmm.
But when it's an object of use, or when it's been given to you in like a symbolic exchange, that's not covered up. Like, that's actually uncovered. Like, you can see the history of the object. Um, so that the object of use is what it's the language I use. Like, it's negative, and it has negation in it, and it has contradiction in it, and it has a process and a life, to speak loosely. Whereas the commodity does away with all of that, and the commodity just presents itself as the substantial object. And when we, I don't know, like when exchange is just a part of life, that's okay, because sometimes you just want to go buy a shovel and you just need a shovel.
Hmm.
You don't need to think about the global network of labor that went into that. You just need a fucking shovel because you have to move something.
Right.
But when like our daily lives have been conditioned to where exchange is all we can do, like we're forced into the commodity form, with not just with social media, but with like consumption habits in general. Like, before we even got the internet, we were already commoditizing ourselves. We were already placed on this stage of performance. Um, so the commodity embodies this trend towards substantialization, like the substantial object, like uh, subject becoming substance. Like the commodity did that. The commodity did away with all negativity. And we are commodities when the world is conditioned by capitalism, and so we are becoming objects. Like we are losing that something special, that irreducible thing
Mm.
in the human that sets us apart from just kind of rote mechanical intelligence. So um I don't know. It's definitely personifying and probably doing some mystification, but also it's also true. Like the commodity value exchange, like all these things really are pulling us on a one way uh, path to ultimately death, like the dissolution of the subject, the cessation of being in a sense. If you and you know uh, like it is the contradiction, it is the negation, it is the hole in the middle, Hegel's bagel, right? Like that gap is constitutive, but the commodity has no gap, it has no lack.
Hmm. Do you think? I guess my question would be: do you think there's something unique about the commodity in that way, or is the commodity kind of a function of the way that we deprive things of their, their relational status? Is that like something that we do? Are there other examples of that that are outside of capitalism or outside the commodity, or is the commodity something unique? Do you think?
I, and that's the thing, I don't know if it's unique. I know when capitalism is the predominant method of exchange and production, um it's I, I don't know if it's unique. Like I've thought about it and like, well, maybe some religious totems have this quality, but also no, they don't, because they have the history of the people who made them, and they're
Mm.
positivistic in a way, but they also have negativity. So I don't know if it's necessarily unique historically. I do know that it is the primary function of capitalism.
Mm.
And when capitalism, it's not even the predominant mode of exchange. It's like 99% the only mode of exchange anymore in the world we live in today. And that conditions and even determines, again, the playing field. It sets up the chessboard, it creates the chess rules, and we're all in these little boxes, and we're fighting against each other, and being, going without and being immiserated, and being deprived of dignity and um, joy and happiness and love and all this stuff. So it functions uniquely enough. Now, to say is it historically unique? I don't know. I'm not a historian, but I think the function of it is we're in a unique situation with relation to the commodity form.
Right, that makes sense. Yeah, the way that the commodities are, you know, instrumental in capitalism definitely would be a difference. But I'm just curious. I think it's interesting to consider whether that's like because I think it can become mystified. I think when people hear about commodities or talk about commodities, it becomes like this magical property of capitalism.
Yeah.
Whereas I would critique it. I'd be more interested in it as a kind of like a normal phenomenon that happens, that isn't this like mystified special thing. It's just kind of a thing that happens, and capitalism does it in this specific way. And that would be, yeah.
I think that's it. I think capitalism does it in this specific way, that kind of leaves us no other choice. Um, because yeah, again, like sometimes you just need a shovel. Sometimes the shovel has no actual meaning, but when you're kind of forced to interact with this global system that deals with kind of hard numbers and positivistic facts, and everything is a statistic, and everything is machinic, and this and that, then it becomes like that specific thing that is depriving you. Whereas, um, I don't know, 10,000 years ago, it probably didn't matter
Mm.
if the object was just some random bullshit, or if you had a personal relation to it, an I thou relation to your shovel.
Mm. Yeah, what do you think about do you worry about like kind of unfalsifiable stories? Because one of the things about like leftism or Marxism or a critique of capitalism is that you can kind of do, and this is the case for a lot of what I would consider dangerous ideologies, like whether it's like Nazism or conspiracy thinking, or it's where the belief like justifies and encloses itself. So if I said, what do you think about this guy's defense of capitalism, and I showed you some like capitalist guy who says capitalism is the best because it's rational It's just organizing things. It's like instrumental. It's really good for us. If I said, "What do you think about that? What's your counter argument?" Most people, most critics of capitalism would say, "Well, of course he thinks that. That's what capitalism makes you think. That's what you're supposed to think. He's right within capitalism, but because of that, he's unable to see outside of it." And so it becomes kind of unfalsifiable. Like you can't really entertain the counter argument because the counter argument is contained in the thing that you're critiquing. So you have to throw out the counter argument too, and then there's no like really counterpoint. There's no other side, and so you're kind of enclosing yourself in that position, which is something that I'm wary of. Again, like I said, in general, as a trend.
Yeah, I think um, first of all, capitalism has done amazing things.
Mm,
Capitalism. Part of it is the deterritorialization and the decoding and the liberating. Like capitalism has liberated a lot of humans and made a lot of good things happen. Now, ultimately, I think it is this like autophagic system that's doomed to fail, not
mm,
not because it conditions you into false consciousness, but just because it's unsustainable. Like it's a feedback loop. It's a wick, and it's burning, 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 and it will run out of fuel. And
mm,
currently, humans are the fuel for that, and also the planet, and also animals,
mm,
and all this stuff. But so just to say that, just to piss off all the communists. But also, I think proper communists understand that
yeah.
capitalism is that like has done these things.
Mm,
Like Marx was critiquing capital because he was very interested in it, and he was like, "Wow, look at all the good things that I have access to. Let's think about this system and let's try to situate ourselves." Um, I think the kind of unfalsifiable thing, that's why skepticism is important. That's why thinking in isolation is ultimately a recipe for disaster. I think that's
mm,
why you do need to have like discourse with other people, especially people who, first of all, no one agrees with anyone else.
mm,
First of all, we are ultimately at like some core irreducibility. Like there is just a core misunderstanding or a core misapprehension. So people who think I agree with my fellow communists on everything, like
right.
no, you don't. You can't. It's impossible.
Mm,
Unless we got the brain chips. If we had the brain
right.
chips, then we could. But no, I do think that's very dangerous. I think it's being accelerated by the medium. I think that's why there's so much passion and even vitriol and energy in online political spaces is because people fall into that false consciousness of being like we have the truth.
Right.
We don't have the truth, dude. We
Mm,
can't have the truth. Sorry, homie. Um and when we like find ourselves there and still nevertheless want to pursue the truth, I think that's when you can actually get down to the business of like really critiquing, not just criticizing,
mm,
but actually kind of critiquing. But even then, like that fallibility should always be protected, and always be like, yeah, I'm ultimately fallible. I'm ultimately probably wrong. So certainty and being overly credulous is very dangerous.
mm. Yeah, I feel like that's. I would make kind of a normative claim that it does feel like taking that approach is better than people who are completely certain of themselves. It just seems like the worst things that have happened in human history. If there's one commonality of them, it is kind of unnecessary certainty. That's probably I feel like that's
Yeah.
probably one of the worst ones. Um, or suppressed doubt. I'm sure those people doubted, but they
Ooh.
they like suppressed it. Um,
Yeah. 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 No, I think no, yeah, I would definitely make that prescription, and I think that's properly Hegelian, and I think that's properly rigorous. Um, I think oh, we like philosophy. Like wasn't that what Socrates was doing? Wasn't that what Plato was doing? And
mm,
like that's been the project of critique all along. So I think if there is anything you're going to be normative about, um, that's safe to prescribe, probably, but maybe
probably.
not. I don't know. Who knows?
Well, yeah, depends on who you talk to. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah.
Because I do feel like there's a lot of people who are suspicious of me because I'm okay with doubting and self questioning. and they're like, well, no, you're dishonest, like you have a position, and your position is against mine, and you're an enemy, basically.
Mm.
And I'm like, okay, well, maybe, but I do think the doubt matters. I do think that represents something. I think that has a purpose to it, and it's not all about necessarily where we would end up if I had to pick a position to hold. I don't think that's the whole story. I think the doubt says something. I think that means something. I think that matters.
Yeah. First of all, I mean, you definitely always do have a position, whether you know it or
Mm,
not. Everybody does. We all always do, and we're always either like taking that position up, or we're trying to negate that position, or
mm,
trying to investigate that position. Always. So it's not necessarily wrong to say you do have a position that's opposed to
for
mine.
sure.
Sure, maybe, and probably, but yeah, the doubt is like what makes all this possible.
Mm,
Again, going back to the importance of negativity, the importance of lack, the importance of uncertainty.
mm,
Like language is taken up as this tool that's entirely positivistic and perfect and totalizing. Um, and no, it's not.
mm,
Like so, you can't use language with that certainty. Now, you also can't perform the postmodern. Well, what does that word mean? What does that word mean? Like you do need a shared ground. um and I don't think it's that hard to find shared ground with people, like people
mm,
who problematize it and say, well, then you're just the postmodernists and you're worried about the meaning of words and this and that. Like, no, if you're genuinely earnestly engaged in
mm.
conversation, it's not that difficult to find shared ground. It's really not.
Yeah.
So um but again, you have to have doubt in your own convictions, or
Mm,
maybe not doubt in your own convictions, but you have to be able to be self-critical to make up that shared ground with people. So I empathize with people who can't find shared ground, because they're probably coming from this position of lack, and they're trying to repress it
mm,
rather than like take it up. Like lack is freedom, dude. Negation is like
mm,
liberating. It's not this kind of precarious place where you have to protect yourself. And
mm,
but when we're online and when everything is an image and a screen and everyone's a commodity product,
mm,
you can't perform lack. You have to perform certainty and you know I'm strong and virile and positivistic. And so that's another way the commodity like infects us and takes away our ability to be humans. It's disallowing critical conversations between other humans.
yeah, I think that's another thing about maybe existence generally, but also under capitalism, I suppose, is how your like role determines who you are, right? So you can
Mm-hmm.
be a person who's like super genuine and honest and whatever, and then if you become like a podcaster, for example, like you have certain like ways you have to act, and people can just find themselves like binding themselves to that role and kind of changing themselves in that way, which I try to push against because I keep saying like I don't understand why I have to. I mean, I understand why, but I don't think I should act a certain way just because this is how podcasters act, and I need to follow this role, and I need to do this thing. I mean, like I feel like we have to be able to like question our role, like our kind of there has to be a way to reflect on. We probably shouldn't just accept the way things are and kind of affirm like this is my role, this is my responsibility, this is what determines my behavior in this way. You have to be able to first of all acknowledge that that is happening, because a lot of people won't even do that, but acknowledge that there is kind of that determinative character of your role, and then challenge that in some way. But that's like a very difficult line for people to walk, it seems like.
Yeah, that's I was just talking about Pete Berger with a buddy of mine. Shout out Christopher. That's and like Pierre Bourdieu. Like that. That's
Hmm.
that's kind of central to what I think maybe a lot of people would view as like postmodern sociology. But it is that just like how like not you're not just doing what you're doing. You're not just doing what you think you're doing. You're also like completing a function for the
Hmm.
structure that you exist inside of, and you have to be able to once again be critical of yourself, um, and the consequences of your actions, both intentional and unintentional and
Hmm.
unwitting. Even like it's not even unconscious. It's just like I don't have a choice. By doing what I am doing, I am causing this this effect in this way, which is terrifying. Like that's another
Mm.
thing that often um, it's petrifying. Like it can kind of scare you into doing nothing. And maybe sometimes doing nothing is the proper course of action, but probably not most of the time. And that's like the responsibility of being a human. Like every choice you make is also precluding a billion other choices, and every action that you take, you have your intended consequences, you have the unintentional consequences, and then you have the inevitable consequences.
Right.
Why
Yeah.
like
There's.
Byung Chul Han says like go be a flower on a riverbank, and that's very compelling.
Mm.
But I think ultimately I think that's like a reactionary point of view. It's a retreat from
Mm.
being a human, because being a human is terrifying, dude. But it's
Right.
also fucking cool, and it's also like no, this is our responsibility. It's our burden, but it's also our privilege.
Yeah. That's the other side of the problem is that you can't just say, well, I'm going to break my role, and so I'm not going to fulfill any of the responsibilities of my role. I'm just going to be a hermit or something, because roles determine your being. So I'm nothing. Like you can't take that position either, because, like you said, I mean, that is like depriving yourself of. That's like an abdication of the task in some way, of the responsibility
Yeah.
of the struggle, whatever. There's this really great book. Everyone knows like Kurt Vonnegut, Slaughterhouse Five, whatever. But he has this book, Mother Night, which is about like this idea of like you become determined by what you are, and it's very difficult to like separate yourself from that. It's about this like I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's about this guy who's like a Nazi propagandist, like an American guy who ends up in Germany and becomes a Nazi propagandist. And he's not really like a racist guy. He doesn't really care, but he's just like performing the role because he ended up there.
Mm.
And then he ends up finding himself back in America, and all the nicest people to him are like hardcore white supremacists, basically. And he's just like, well, I'm
Oof.
here now. These are my friends, I guess. And he just kind of lives his life, and then he ends up being used by like spies, like Soviet spies or something. And he finds out that his whole life is a lie, and then he gets like executed for war crimes. But anyway, the point, the point of the book is really about that idea, which is why I've always really liked it. As I mean, it, Vonnegut is very clear about that. That's like the theme of the book is that you have to pay attention to the roles you're performing, the performance that you're taking part in. Obviously, it's a very extreme example, but I think it makes the point better because of that. Because it is.
Yeah.
It makes you like sit with it, unless you just dismiss it and say, there are some people, of course, who read that book and they're like, I don't want to read about a Nazi. I don't like those. And it's like, okay, well, sure, okay, but
Yeah. I mean, I could, there would definitely, you catch me on catch me on a off Tuesday and I would not want to read it, but I definitely appreciate people trying to use fiction to say things worth saying. So I was talking to my buddy Sean, and he was like, Gravity's Rainbow. He's like, no, man, fuck that book.
mm,
And I respect his position. Fuck that book. Like he doesn't want to get through this stuff, but then also like, yeah, but there's a point to it.
mm,
So
yeah.
yeah,
I haven't read that one. I don't know much about it, but I do know I have heard of it. I do know the lore about it, that it's like some horrible. Some people are just unapologetic, like it's just awful, it's trash. But I mean, I'm sure I'd be. I don't know. I have no idea if there's something to it. I guess I can't say that there is, but
it's like Lolita,
mm,
Nabokov. I don't know if you've read that, but like that's a book about a kid fucker, and that's gross.
mm,
But it's also like there's a story and there's a point to it. Um, I don't know, man. We live in the future, dude. There's thousands of books being written currently right now.
mm.
Uh, I definitely like revere certain traditions of fiction and narrative, but I'm also not the type of guy to be like, you have to read that, you have to read that, you have to read that. So I respect people who don't want to read it or don't want to read anything, because there's probably something better being written right now.
Yeah, I actually wanted to ask you about fiction and pop culture and all of that, and what you think about it. Do you Well, I mean, do you see pop culture as art? Do you see it as like,
Mhm.
purely determined by its like capitalist commodity production, or do you see it as like art? Are there particular, I don't know, recent as in the last like really any movie, because any movie is determined by that form of production. But movies or anything that's like, how do you, yeah, what do you think about that? Do you think about it? I haven't really talked about that much, but I'm interested in hearing what people think about that more.
Yeah, I mean, I think the overwhelming majority of our cultural objects are uh, just kind of determined by the form. Like they
Mm,
have to be commodities, so they kind of have no choice in the matter. That doesn't mean there aren't people making the movies, the shows, the music, um, who are really trying to express themselves and really trying to say something. Um, so I think anything probably has the potential to be art for the author and for a particular member of the audience.
mm,
Anything. I think for the most part, um, as long as as long as we are able to engage with cultural objects or with works of art in a critical fashion, um, then yeah, it can be art. Like the thing is, most people don't have that
mm,
distance. Most people go to see the Marvel movie first of all to keep up with the Marvel movie, to keep up with like the modern religion. Uh, it's an injunction, it's a commandment. You must watch Aquaman. You must watch the Avengers. Um, but I'm sure that some of the writers and performers and crew and all that stuff really put a lot of soul into those things. And maybe that's what makes art is just like when you imbue or you try to imbue the end product with a piece of your soul. Um, yeah, I mean, I prefer. I don't keep up with like contemporary stuff. Uh, I'm I'm behind the times on most things. I have in the past couple of years become uh, I've fallen in love with like competition TV shows. So not reality TV like the Jersey Shore and all that, or I don't even know. I'm sure Love Island or well, I guess Love Island is a competition, but I've never. But like The Challenge is one show that I've really been watching recently because it's fascinating to me. There was this other show, The Traders. Uh, it's fucking fascinating, dude. Like it's a competition, and there's a performance, and people are placed in weird ethical
mm,
situations where they have to make
right.
like weird ethical choices, and maybe that's not art, but I also think it can be instructive because it can like demonstrate the audience like, oh, their ethics is a thing, and what would I
Mm,
do in that situation? Or that person made me feel bad. Why did their actions make me feel bad? Or why am I watching this show when I turn it on and I sit and say how much I hate these people for 45 minutes? Why do I
right.
keep coming back to it? Like just the act of consuming it can be instructive. Um, and also it's important to turn your brain off sometimes and just fucking be, and like no pressure to be smart, no pressure to understand things, no pressure to be considerate of others. Like, no, take your shirt off, put your feet up, eat some fucking shitty hot chips and consume, god damn it. Like it's important to be able to enter that mode too.
Mm,
Um but but I also like there is a part of me who I think I am like an enthusiastic believer in the power of narrative and the power
mm,
of fiction. Um, I think it has the power, the ability to reach people in a way that like dry theory doesn't.
mm,
Like there are people who just don't want to read Hegel, and I don't blame them. Um, but maybe you can say something inspired by Hegel by
mm.
way of fiction. Like you can use the language of fiction, you can use the narrative structures to say something worth saying. So yeah, I think art's gonna be okay. Art will probably outlive us.
Yeah, I feel like I've always felt like even if you can acknowledge and you can't really ignore the the utility, the purpose that pop culture serves, that it's made for a purpose, that its production is determined by that. But I've always felt like there's something, I don't know, something artistic, something of value. I don't always go out of my way to find that. Like I'm not going to go watch like every like trash
Yeah,
movie and be like I need to find. But I think if you really try, I think you can find that. I think you can find
for
something
sure.
human. Typically what I'm most interested in is something about human, like something about the human experience, which I guess is similar to what you're describing in like the competition shows, is that there's something about the human experience that you can feel and connect with, and that's kind of the common thread, I guess, between the the narrative or the the Marvel movie. Like if I really, I don't really want to watch a Marvel movie, but if I did, I'd want to look for things like that, like about what what this says about the human, the human experience, which is why my favorite Marvel movie is the one that I think does that the best. The one where I was like, didn't really want to see this, but um, something about this, I feel like you can extrapolate it, and there's deeper themes. But no one, but that's just me. So sometimes it feels like I don't know if I'm going crazy for fixating on those themes. But it. I think it is. I think it's worth doing that though. I think it's. I think it's some kind of flaw in you if you just throw up your hands and say everything is a commodity.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
think that demonstrates kind of a lack of an attempt to try. Like you're not trying. You're not really connecting as much as you could, and that reflects on you more than the the object, commodity itself.
Well, and I mean, that's kind of part of the struggle or the quest or whatever. Like, yeah, these things are all commodities, but they were made by human hands.
Mm.
A beautiful thing Nick Land says in I can't remember the piece now. It's in one of the essays. Um, Mikey and I read, but I don't think we read it live. But he said everything you love is made in hell, and
Mm.
like to me that always resonates because it's like, yeah, dude, everything you love was made in hell, but also it's okay to love it.
Mm.
So like everything presents as a commodity to us, but those commodities were made by human hands. Now even the things that were made on robotic assembly lines, the robots were made by human hands.
Mm.
So like there is still pieces of human soul, and soul's a horrible word to use. I am I hate mysticizing and spiritualizing, but it kind of encapsulates like labor went into these headphones.
Mm.
Like there was a human at some point that toiled. There is, all the child slavery and all the intellectual work that went into the design, and like there's so much that went into our objects. Um, and there is a lot of work that goes into Marvel movies and shitty TV shows. And yeah, you have to be able to recognize the human reflection in the commodity because that's what the commodity does. The commodity says there's no human in this,
Right.
and it's up to us to say, but actually there is.
Mm.
And it's this kind of moment of failed recognition that I think is essential to being able to overcome the commodity. I also think it's easy to sit back and be, I'm so cultured, I don't like that shit. Like, no, dude, I like junk food.
Mm.
I like shitty trash, lowbrow, whatever. Like, I'm white trash, and I have always been and always will be. And I think people who get on any kind of high horse suck, but also they don't suck. They're doing it because they're coming from a position of lack and scarcity and precarity, and so they think they have to perform completeness, and it's a
Mm.
totally phallic thing. So I understand it, but also it gets old. It's like just admit that you have bad habits or you have weird
Yeah.
proclivities and weird preferences. Like we're all weird fucked up humans, dude. We all poop. We all have sex drive. Maybe not everyone has sex, but sex is relative to all of us. We all die at the end of the day. Quit trying to be this like perfect object. That's what capitalism wants you to do.
Mm. Yeah, I think that honesty and that ability, that's also something that I care about a lot overall, is people who are able to be honest, admit their flaws. In some sense I've always liked more flawed people, if they're honest about it. And so I'm just always drawn to those kinds of people, even more so than to people who maybe would be less flawed, but you don't even know about their flaws because they would never tell you. And I'm just not interested in that. I just think that's there's something about like the honesty that is more human to me. But I can never fully resolve if that's just like a preference, like an emotional preference. Like I just prefer that, and it's not necessarily better. It is what it is. So you have to keep that. You have to keep yourself in check like that. Maybe it's just my preference, but um, yeah, I'm trying to. Okay, there was something I wanted to say and then I forgot, so that's unfortunate. I I did see you talk to Studebaker about. You mentioned it briefly here, but about like the difference between like theory and fiction, and the kind of
Yeah.
person who wants to do like what we would consider more like cold rationalistic theory versus like artful fiction. And I think that's like I feel like that's a really hard question to resolve because I feel like it's undeniable that there's something about certain forms of fiction that can make a point that is deeper than um, if you would have tried to elaborate that in words or like in a theory or something. And if we're really being honest, a lot of philosophers, like even Hegel, are using literary moments to really bind
Mhm.
everything together. Like the most compelled I have been by Hegel is like a literary moment where he's like has this like great quote that gets at the heart of something. I mean, those are really for me those are the most compelling moments in most philosophers. I like the theory, but that's really what like holds everything together for me. So I don't know that there has to be this like contradiction between the two. I think they there has to be, it might be kind of the problem might be thinking that we can unpackage the human experience into these like neat boxes, and really there's something that we're grasping at that incorporates all of this that we wouldn't just put into those neat boxes if we could see the whole picture. If we weren't, if we didn't have like a certain perspective or a malformed perspective on these things, which could be related to capitalism also. But um, yeah.
I think people talk about the unreasonable efficacy of maths when they talk about math. And people are like, "Oh, math is this kind of wonderful thing that we discovered that math is in everything."
Hmm.
And sure, math is in everything, sure. But math is also a language. Um, and I think there are some just like fundamental contradictions in maths that bother people, and there are some irresolvable things in math that bother people, and people go to great lengths to figure it out and get to the point. And I think for me, um, math is beautiful because it is beautiful and it is unreasonably effective, but it also kind of demonstrates the limits of language. So when it comes to theory versus art, theory versus fiction, that's a conversation Rudy and I have been having for a while. Like, am I trying to make art? Am I trying to do theory? What is it? What
Hmm.
am I doing? I don't know. Um, and I think some people are convinced that there is a hard line, there is a hard delineation. I think some people are convinced that there isn't. I don't know. There could be they could there could be like distinct disciplines that you just have to have a fundamental attunement to one or the other. But I think maybe I lean in the direction of maybe there's not, because ultimately language has these kind of vagaries and these inefficiencies. Um, and when you're trying to use language to express truth,
Hmm.
maybe sometimes you have to be a little artistic and flowery with it.
Hmm.
Um, because like you tell a lie to unravel a truth or to reveal a truth.
Hmm.
Whereas if you're just trying to do this strict theory thing, you're always trying to tell the truth. Well, you're going to uncover some lies, because ultimately um, things are things are fundamentally strange at the end of the day. So
Right.
yeah,
Yeah, it's something. It's a difficult question that yeah, it's very frustrating how many things we can't seem to resolve in any satisfying way. But
it shouldn't be frustrating though. Like
yeah.
that's freedom. Like that moment, that
Hmm.
moment of irresolvable contradiction is life. that is like we are persisting. We are
Mm.
going off into the future because this can't be resolved. It can't be totalized, can't be positivized. Like that, again, going back to capital and why does capital matter? Why does capitalism matter? Why does Marxism matter? Because it shows us this tendency to positivize everything and totalize everything and have everything be a complete, final, substantial object. And that is, you're frozen in time. You know,
Mm.
hello, Zeno's paradox. Like, uh, we should rejoice in all the confusion and all the irresolvability.
Is
But
that
that's just no, that's just postmodern romantic bullshit. Don't accept that. That's just no. Like we also we do live in the world and we have problems that matter. We have wars, we have um famines, we have problems that are concrete that we can solve. So you can't just sit back and huff farts all day. You do need you
mm.
do need to be objective.
Do you think there's something? Do you find we haven't talked about Zizek most much, but do you think there's something in Zizek about like that negativity that you find really helpful, or yeah, does Zizek come into there or for you there, or
Yeah, I mean, I think Zizek and Todd McGowan
hmm,
have opened up Hegel for, I think, for me, definitely. And I think I was going to say for most people. I don't know if it's true for most people or not. I think maybe a lot of people would say, yeah, I don't care about Zizek and I don't care about McGowan, maybe. But I think it is that like negativity is the thing itself.
hmm,
Like that is from Todd and Zizek on Hegel.
hmm,
So I think it's like that. That lack is a precondition for everything. Like that lack is what makes anything possible.
right, yeah. Um, I actually wanted to. I just remembered what I was gonna ask before. You said you had like a big critique of like the spiritual, people who say they're spiritual and like the new agey. Like, what is your? I'm interested to hear what you had to say about that because that's. I mean, I definitely have problems with it, but I'm curious how you would conceive of that problem.
Well, I think the like the spiritual but not religious thing is just like a disavowal, and
Mm,
it's like positing presuppositions, but then saying, but I don't have to answer. Like I don't have. I'm going to claim this historical tradition, but I don't have to answer for any of its crimes. And
mm,
of course, you don't have to answer for your historical tradition's crimes, but you can pretend like they don't exist,
mm,
and you can have your cake and eat it too. And I think the spiritual but not religious thing, like that is uncritical postmodern ideology. Like
mm,
that is failing to take responsibility for oneself as a human and as a subject,
mm,
and just allowing the I don't know, like allowing whatever god that's kind of predominant in your culture or whatever to serve this position of god, but you kind of cut ties in this weird way. I think um it's narcissistic. Like structurally, it's like no, you. I mean, sure, you can have whatever beliefs you want to have,
mm,
but when you're kind of performing it in that way, and when you're asking me to take it seriously in a way, uh, it's I think more absurd than religion. I also think religion is absurd. I think religion needs to be done away with too. But the spiritual but not religious thing, I think is uh, just cancerous and just
mm,
like super duper structurally narcissistic, and we should push back on that, and we should say, well, are you or are you not? Like, because I think that's an important question to answer for yourself. Like,
mm,
do I believe in God? Do I not? And like, and again, the answer doesn't matter. It's just the fact that you're actually critically engaged with your own situatedness in the social field is what's important. I think
mm,
it's a way to disavow that and shirk off the responsibility of being an ethical person. Like I don't have to think about the consequences of my actions because I believe the universal spirit is guiding me, and I can like make weird TikToks that are just really weirdly regressive and bigoted, but it
mm,
serves the universal love and light and shit like that. And it's like, no, take responsibility for your beliefs. Have them, by all means have them, but take them up, take responsibility for yourself.
Yeah, it's also this kind of like empty abstraction where you're drawing like a line between you're trying to like take yourself away from the material world, and in doing so you're just relying on this very empty concept of religion where it's just like a dualistic, there's a spirit world, and that's where I can retreat into in a very narcissistic way, as you mentioned. You can retreat into there without actually dealing with the problems, because religion, for all its faults, it didn't like retreat from the question of, especially Christianity, it didn't retreat from the question of like what's on earth. Like it was like, yeah, I mean, this is how it is, this is our life here. Is we're not just going to say, I don't know, be a good person and go to heaven. We actually have to structure things, we have to account for things, we have to have beliefs, we have to have a structure. And so it was a full form of being and society, a whole system, a whole metaphysical system. Whereas, yeah, these people are just kind of saying, I don't know, there's something outside that I can retreat into because it makes me
Yep.
feel better. So that is, yeah. I mean, yeah, obviously not me, not my type of, not my vibe. That's not my thing. I would not be saying those things. But I think it's important to articulate exactly why we disagree with it, because it matters. A really big thing for me is it matters why you disagree with something, not just that you disagree with
Mm-hmm.
something, right? Because a lot of people can have positions on things that we might agree with, but the way they got there might be crazy, like absolutely like wild, and you can't really endorse that person or that position if they got there in a wild way. Like I think that's important to keep in mind, because there's often a tendency, especially on the left, I think, to be like ends first. Like we have,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
we have a goal. Anyone who agrees with us on that goal is on our side. That's it. That's the whole thing. And it's like, well, I mean, the way you get there, the methods you employ, your way, the way you think about things, the way you get through to things is incredibly important. It's like maybe more important, or at least just as important as where you're going. So,
Yeah, man. It's always the friends we make along the way. To invert that meme, I have a buddy who is convinced that 5G radiation is giving us all like reptilian
mm,
pedo cancer.
right.
Um, and and but the conclusion that he comes to from this is that we should get more distance from our devices. We should spend less
Mm,
time online, and we should be more critical of engaging with the real world as opposed to the digital world. And I agree with him on that conclusion. But his methods,
yeah.
his reasoning is
Yeah.
fundamentally broken. And so he and I always disagree. But it's definitely it's interesting because we are aligned functionally, but there's like meaningfully big differences, and it does matter. It's like, no, it's not just that you think we should get off our devices. It actually does matter that you believe in the reptile people, and the
Mm,
like, that matters just as much as getting off the internet, because I think being on the internet so much fed into his beliefs of the
yeah.
reptile pedo vampires. And but yeah, the means um have to be justifiable just as much as the ends, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, otherwise you end up, I guess, kind of objectifying it, kind of in a similar sense, with like the commodity. What you end up doing is you put your faith into different objects, right? The
Yep.
conspiracy or whatever, and you're not really concerned about like people not being on their phones. You're concerned with the lizard people, and you're going to start seeing lizard people
Yeah.
everywhere, and that can be dangerous. That's probably not good.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean that's really the thing. I guess that's even connected to why I'm skeptical of people who are like super angry about the Democrats all the time, because
Mm.
I just feel like if that's your if you at a certain it's like the Mother Night book also, like at some point if you do enough Nazi propaganda you're just a Nazi, right? At some point if
Hmm.
all you do is hate on Democrats, that's what you are. You're the guy who hates on Democrats now. Like you're not really offering a solution. You're not criticizing the system. Your personality is literally just that. Like you have to be aware of what you're doing, I guess.
Yeah.
And this all has to do with Hegel too, in a sense, where you're not just you're not defined by your actions. You're not defined by your thoughts either. There's this again, there's like an interplay between the two, and that is like subjectivity, I guess, something like that. Um, so yeah, it's complicated, but I think these are the things we have to keep in mind. Um, and work through, I
Yeah.
guess. What is your so you mentioned that you like struggle sometimes with like knowing where to, feeling like whether asking yourself whether this is worth it or not. So what's your like what is your main priority right now? Like what's your focus? What are you trying to do in terms of like specific goals or just in general like what your mission is? Like where's your mind at right now? Your focus.
I think in general, I'm trying to atone for a life of sin. Um, uh, no, I think my primary concern is being present as a member of a family. Um, I have like kids and stuff that I have to like be here for. And it's very easy to fall into work as like, I just have to work, I just have to work, I just have to work, and allow that to become like a disavowal of being afraid to be responsible for that. Like being a parent, it's a hard job, it's a scary job, but it's cool. So I think there's that being a member of a family, being a member of an embodied. I hate to use the word, but we'll use it. Community or group of
Mm.
people who are engaged in theory and philosophy and maybe even art. Um, Trying to be a responsible member of that. We're working on right now. Capital versus Subjectivity will
Mm.
be released soon. We don't have a hard date, but that's kind of like a functional, actual thing we're doing. Getting really excited for the course at Philosophy Portal. Go check out Philosophy Portal, everybody. Mikey's going to be giving a course, and there's also a course going on right now there that's awesome, and one coming up next month that's awesome. Um, and trying to write in a way that I don't feel is masturbatory. Um, trying to like actually add something to it. Like I think being on the internet and podcasting and releasing short stories and essays and all that stuff all the time, while it's something I want to do, it's also something that it's just like, this is just more shit. This is part of the problem.
Mm.
This is part of the problem. So that, like, that ongoing negotiation with
Mm.
like, am I helping, am I hurting, it's always a primary concern. And I think probably having like a good group of homies and road dogs is probably a good way to like overcome that, because you can ask someone straight up like,
Mm.
is this just bullshit, and they'll be like, yeah, it is, or they'll be like, no, that's actually really good, you should probably share it. So yeah, I think being a good member of a family, being actually productive on actual projects, and then more abstractly actually working toward um, not being like a malignant presence, like actually trying to help, to use a weird word to use there, but
Mm.
be a beneficial presence
Mm.
in the medium itself.
Right. Okay, well that I really appreciate that. Yeah, I really like asking people like where their mind is at on things like that, where their presence on the internet, that sort of thing. I think it's really interesting. Probably the best part of my conversation with Studebaker too is when I asked him that question. But um, yeah, is there anything else you want to talk about, get to before we end out here?
Um, I don't know. I don't want to plug anything, but go read Exocapitalism. Um, Good book recently came out. Like I said,
There it
Capital
is.
versus Subjectivity will be out soon. Check out Michael Downs' The Dangerous Maybe.
Mm.
Check out Philosophy Portal. Shout out all my homies, all my road dogs. And thank you for having a conversation with me, man. I had a great time. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, it was really good talking to you. Like you
Yeah.
said, if you're really trying, I think you can see that there's actually a lot of like surprising similarity between the way that you and I think about things that we might not have been obvious if we went into this in like an adversarial or some other form. So it's really good to see that. Really appreciate it. I had a really good time talking to you too.
Yeah.
And
Hell yeah.
yeah, thank you for being on, and thank you everyone for watching.